Hello, and welcome to the third session of CPAC Summer School, Effective Meetings. This program, this series of CPAC Summer School, is brought to you by the Federation for Children with Special Needs. And tonight we're going to talk about how to have effective meetings for your CPAC or any group within your community. So for those of you who are new to the Federation, just to remind you a little bit about who we are, we're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to provide information and support to parents of children with special needs, but also to the professionals that work with them and their communities. So we're really committed to listening and learning from you, and that's why sessions like this are so important, because it allows some feedback so we can figure out what's working for you, what more you need to learn. Today's learning objectives in this session is understanding how to draft an agenda that really works for your meeting, to keep accurate meeting minutes, because those are the formal record of the meeting, to help you connect with your group members, because that's what's really going to make it an effective meeting, if you're listening and learning from those who show up to a meeting, and then how to establish effective communication, that two-way communication, so that not only are you disseminating and giving out information, but you're taking information in. And that's a key role for a CPAC as an advisory body. So last time we talked about some of the tools that you might use around having an effective meeting, one of which was a meeting facilitator, which often in the CPAC is the chair of the CPAC. Setting up some ground rules so everybody knows how the meeting's going to operate and has correct expectations. An agenda, which really is setting up, how that meeting's going to go. The importance of meeting minutes as the formal documentation of what happened. Following the written guidance that your CPAC has, which are the bylaws, so that can give insight as to how the meeting might be run. And then thinking about closed and open sessions, most CPAC meetings are open sessions. We really want to be inclusive and invite people to participate in our meetings. And during the live session, we shared some examples of ground rules that your CPAC might want to have, and what some CPACs actually have is their ground rules. And for example, that you might put your cell phones on vibrate, so that even though you've got a call, it wouldn't disturb the meeting and you'd still be able to leave the meeting and answer it. People brought up the concept of confidentiality in the meeting. What happens and what's divulged in the meeting was confidential, that we wanted to protect families' privacy, but still be able to discuss certain things. And one CPAC is a really interesting rule where the parents only attend for the first 30 minutes, and they're able to discuss and air concerns, and then the administration joins after the first 30 minutes. So I thought that was an interesting rule, but also expectations that if you really wanted to discuss something without the administration in the meeting, that you do it in the first 30 minutes. And it was an interesting structure. It also allowed issues to be raised, and then they later could be brought up almost anonymously by the group, stating that this issue would come up in the first 30 minutes and you wanted to discuss it. So I just thought it was an interesting approach, kind of a local rule that is working for that CPAC. So we talked about the agenda being the roadmap for your meeting. The group leader or the chair usually sets the agenda, takes in input in terms of action items that people would want to have on the agenda, and crafts the agenda. We always thought that best practice is to share it at least 2 days in advance, so people were aware of what was going to happen at a meeting. CPACs no longer have to follow the open meeting law and publish an agenda 48 hours in advance, but we're going to keep that best practice and do it in advance, so that you're prepared. You do it in before a meeting, and then you share it so people have knowledge of what the topics are going to be discussed at that meeting. The agenda really sets out how the meeting's going to be run. It can include, time elements so that the welcome and introductions might take 5 to 10 minutes. The approval of the prior meeting's minutes would be, say, an additional 5 minutes. And then you kind of know that you're on track to have a timely meeting and to make best use of time. It also might, by putting time structure within there, you could ask how many people want to discuss a certain topic, or bring up discussion on a new topic. And you could poll the audience and see if there are 10 people and you have 30 minutes. So you want to give people like 2 minutes to present or talk about it or give their comment, and still reserve some time for follow-up questions or further discussion. So it helps you adjust even how people participate in a meeting by having that agenda with maybe some time parameters on it. Doesn't mean you can't extend it or borrow time from another place. New business and or old business might go on an agenda. You might have carried over an item or revisit an item that hadn't been decided on. There's no definitive end to it, but it's always good to have items come up, have a decision made, and then your minutes will reflect how you're going to further act, but have some process that things don't come up all of the time on your agenda, that you're dealing with issues and moving on to new things. There might be a time that you ask for public comment or new business, or allow even members of the public who have attending your open meeting to make a comment. It's just how you practice, how you structure a meeting. Towards the end of a meeting, it's always good to review announcements of events that might be of interest to members, activities, things coming up, or even future workshops that might be happening for the CPAC. Announcing that reminds people that, put it on their calendar, save the date, and just brings it to the forefront of people's bandwidth, because these are very busy times. And also, I think that your meeting agenda should have the next meeting specifics, so that people do know when you're next going to meet, especially if you don't meet monthly, like on the third Thursday of every month. If it's more random, that you have that information in your agenda, and it's part of the minutes so that people are aware. We spoke at the meeting minutes, or the formal record, and that is really helps not only the people who attended the meeting to remember what occurred, but for those who did not attend, and they can now review the minutes and be more up to date on the business activities of the group. So they record any decisions voted on, any follow-up actions, and we recommend that you kind of identify who and a time frame for any follow-up actions, so that there's some sense of understanding of how long something's going to take. Your minutes should be simple. Following the agenda item, you can almost use the agenda as the outline for your minutes, and then plug in what happened throughout the agenda. Talk about discussion. You don't have to list every person's comment. You can talk about some of the pros and cons of a discussion, and then if there was a vote taken, record the vote. And it depends on how your CPAC votes on things. It's whether it's majority rule, whether you have a consensus and the consensus moves forward and this is what your decision is. So you record the decisions and action items of the group. Each month following, the minutes are reviewed. If there are any corrections or additions to be made, those will be made, and ultimately they will be approved at the next meeting. And that is a process so that you do the minutes, they become available after they're approved. Upon request, often best practice is, if you have access to a website, to post them on a website, because that's really the public kind of way of following the activities and work of the CPAC. We spoke about written guidance being helpful to CPACs as a tool, but it also helps you have an effective meeting. if you are new to any group, I always suggest that you ask for a copy of the bylaws and read them through. In fact, you may want to keep a printed copy with you as you attend meetings, because you can refer back to them, because it'll speak to a lot of the practices that happen within a meeting. For example, the group's mission and purpose. So you can see as the group is discussing something, you can be guided by its stated mission and purpose, and make sure that you're doing things in accordance with that mission and not straying too far away from it. So it can help with the decision making and the discussion at a meeting. The roles of everyone in the CPAC are defined in the bylaws, and so you'll know the roles of the people within the group, and some of the duties of the officers. So you know when people are acting and in what capacity, and it'll help you understand how they participate in a meeting. If any voting has to occur, or decisions are made by voting, that would be defined in the bylaws, and you would understand, am I a voting member? What does it take to be a voting member? And then how decisions are moved forward in terms of they're looked for a quorum or a majority of the members present voting on an issue would carry it forward. The terms of office and elections are also defined in the meeting, and those might come up at meetings. And just so you know, you can always amend the bylaws. So at any time, if they're not working as a group and it's just not the way you want to practice anymore, I suggest that you publish amended bylaws as a draft for the community. They have an opportunity to review them, and then you state that the date of the next meeting when those would be voted on. So if they wanted to attend and vote in the new bylaws, the amended bylaws, or wanted to attend and make additions and corrections, they would have that opportunity. So the bylaws do help you with meetings in terms of identifying how your organization operates and runs. So some meeting tips are to start and end on time, try to keep on task, setting a welcoming tone, have some way of ice or nice breakers so that you can meet people in your community, meet people in the room. It's always nice to have a way to connect with those in the group. And so it's one way to learn a little bit about those people who are attending. And it's also kind of fun. I hope CPACs work to make sure that all viewpoints are represented, that you're making sure you're reaching out into your communities. And if there are groups that are not represented, that you're doing invitations out to them, making that personal connection, either offering to meet with them or go to where they meet to make them more comfortable, whatever really works. But you need to have all those viewpoints represented in your practices and your decision making. And part of structuring your meeting is that everyone should have an opportunity to participate, to give feedback, to make a comment, to vote if they are a voting member. It's all about really making the meetings valuable for the people who are attending them, so that they feel like they're part of the process and that they have a stake in the game. It's a little bit more difficult on Zoom. And we discussed in the live session some Zoom meeting tips about maybe renaming yourself so that people knew if you were representing a certain, your child was in a certain school, in a certain school community, to use the tools within a virtual platform for voting. You could raise hands, and it allows you to maybe move the meeting a little more smoothly by using some of the virtual tools. We know that some people don't always have their camera on, but you want people to be able to use the chat box maybe to make comments. And some of these platforms have polls, so you can ask questions and collect data using the virtual tools also. So sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier. It's just different, and I think you should adjust your meeting to fit your platform, so that whether you're in person or virtual. One of the things that come up with groups are often there are new members and they really don't know the culture of your group and how it operates. And having a new member orientation might be the right way to really orient new people to your group, answer their questions outside of a regular business meeting, and talk about some of the ground rules that the way you have been operating and established, and ask for their input also. We recommend that you try to limit the use of jargon and acronyms. It's always difficult in the special education world. We start to talk about IEPs and the LRE, and if you were new to special education, you would have no idea what I was talking about. So if you are going to use an acronym or a specific term, just define it so that you put everybody on the same ground, and make things user-friendly. We hope that if you have different communities attending your CPAC meeting, there might be a group of families that don't speak English as a first language. And is there a way that you can work with the school district to have interpretation happen so that those families can participate? There's software sometimes that if a meeting is captioned, if you're on Zoom, that they might be able to convert it to different languages, but really having an interpreter available so that you're allowing access by everyone so that you're getting all of those perspectives and feedback to your CPAC. It's a discussion that you might need to have with your school district around funding, and make sure that you're providing equitable access when requested by members. I also hope that CPACs learn and recognize that there are different cultural variations in those people who may be wanting to participate, whether it's in person or on Zoom. Often the activities of the CPAC may or may not conflict with some cultural norms. I was doing a workshop on telling your story and talking about how important it was to share your family's personal story to affect legislation or decision making around policy. And someone reminded me that not all cultures feel comfortable sharing personal stories, especially in public. And that, it was information that I needed to kind of take in and realize that my words may not be appropriate for everyone. So it's always understanding who you're speaking to, talk to them, make sure that it is culturally appropriate, and that there's some give and take around what you're asking people to do so that they feel comfortable. And that it's a lot of building those relationships with those communities so that you understand even language. I know when I do post-secondary workshops, I tend not to use the word independence. With a lot of groups, I talk about building skills for people because not everyone values independence and having their young person at 18 all of a sudden become an independent person. It's understanding what is appropriate and what makes people feel comfortable when you're sharing information. I always encourage mentoring. It's great for a person who's been involved with the CPAC to mentor a new member, to answer those questions, provide some guidance, show them the way, maybe even teach them a skill that is needed within the CPAC, or pass on a skill like being the secretary of the CPAC. It's always nice to have a mentor, somebody who's there and you can co-share a duty as somebody new takes over. And your CPAC is going to need to develop an ongoing way that you're communicating with your community. Not everyone is on Facebook. Not everyone reads their email. So you just need to figure that out, maybe develop some multiple ways of communicating with your community, because that's how you're really going to build relationships within your membership. So two-way communication is best. That's when both parties are transmitting information. If you're just always on the receiving side of information, you're not going to feel involved. And so if the sender has information from you, that knowing that it was received accurately, and you're providing, that feedback and information back to them, then there's that cycle, that loop of communication that's so important, especially for CPACs who are now in an advisory role. So they need to take in information. And so information can flow sideways, and it can also flow up and down. And so making sure that you're in those pathways to communicate so that it is much more effective. A lot of CPACs use surveys, and we'll send out that survey and expect information to just come flowing in. But wouldn't it be better if maybe that could be done either in person or on the phone, so that you're getting a conversation started, and you're now not only offering some information or a question, you're getting information back, and that person can ask you questions. So I think that's a different way of getting information and communicating with your members. There are virtual community message boards, which you can post things and allow people to answer or post information. We know that the open houses are part of our school communities, and CPACs often have a table if it's in a live session, but not every family feels comfortable coming up to those tables. So are there other ways and other ways that you can disseminate information and start those conversations? Informal coffees. Does your CPAC have an opportunity for parents just to get together and talk, and even outside of a support group meeting? I know a lot of the principals have coffees, and maybe the PTA and PTOs do, but it's just really listening and learning, that two-way conversation of sharing information, but also getting the feedback so that you're informed and you can make things better. A lot of CPACs also do some kind of a focus group or public listening in session where they, specifically ask for feedback and start collecting information. But then, because you're in a session which has two-way communication, you can also ask questions back and clarify and be more specific around the information that you're gathering. All of that is leading to better communication, better relationships, and really better working relationships. So here are a couple of resources that I'm suggesting for this session. The first one is a checklist around creating and improving minutes from our Massachusetts Secretary of State's office. It's just a PDF, a simple document, but it kind of walks you through about what should go in the agenda and the minutes, so that it's a good record of your meeting. Here's a website, Establishing Group Norms, that walks you through a process working with your group to establish your group's norms, and just making it a lot more inclusive and reflective of the group's needs. And for those of you who don't know, this whole CPAC Summer School is based on the Serving on Groups curriculum. So that's a link to the guidebook, and this section is based on sections 4 and 5. So you can do a little bit more reading on that, and a little bit more in-depth analysis on this section. So thank you for attending tonight, and this will be posted to the YouTube channel, so you can look forward to reviewing sessions 1 and 2 and going on and viewing the ones as the later sessions as they become available. Thank you, and have a great day.